Okay, so today we're diving into a real fashion paradox. In Kenya, you've got this wild situation where the country is a massive producer of clothes for the whole world, but at the same time, it's also a massive consumer of, well, our old clothes. So how does that even work? Let's break it down.
So it all boils down to this one simple question, right? When you pick up a garment and the label says Made in Kenya, what are you actually holding? What does that really mean? Because as we're about to see, that little tag tells two completely different, almost contradictory stories.
And boom, here it is. This contrast just says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you've got a squeaky clean, super modern factory churning out brand new clothes for export. And on the other, you have this incredible, sprawling, chaotic market. This is where a huge number of Kenyans actually shop. It's like two different universes existing in the very same place.
All right, so let's tackle the first thread of this story. This is the powerhouse side of things, Kenya, the global export engine. And honestly, it's a story of some pretty incredible growth and success.
Now, what's fueling all this? Well, a big part of it is a U.S. trade deal called AGO. I know, acronyms, but stick with me. All you really need to know is that this deal lets Kenya ship a ton of stuff, especially clothes, to the U.S. without paying any import taxes. And let me tell you, that one policy has been an absolute game changer.
So, just how much of a game changer are we talking about? Well, get this. In 2024 alone, we're looking at 60.6 times billion Kenyan shillings just from apparel exports to the U.S. That's a massive number. It really gives you a sense of the sheer scale of this operation.
But, it's not just about the money, as huge as that number is. It's about people. It's about jobs. Over 66,000 Kenyans are directly employed in the sector. That's 66,000 people making a living, producing clothes that end up in closets all over the world.
And this is where all that magic happens. These are called export processing zones, or EPZs. You can basically think of them as these special industrial parks, set up with all the right conditions to just produce. We're talking modern factories pumping out millions and millions of garments for some of the biggest brands you and I see every day.
So, yeah, look, by any standard, this part of the story is a huge success. It shows Kenya's incredible manufacturing power and its key place in the global fashion machine. But, and this is a big but, that's only half the story.
Okay, let's pivot. Now we need to talk about the other side of this coin. Because at the exact same time that all those new clothes are being shipped out of Kenya, there's a literal mountain of secondhand clothes being shipped in. And this is the reality for most people who actually live there.
I mean, just look at these numbers side by side. It's kind of mind-blowing. Kenya exports around 116 million new clothing items to the U.S. every year. Meanwhile, it imports more than 177,000 tons of used clothing. It's an absolute flood, and it completely defines what the local market looks and feels like.
And this whole world has a name. It's called mutumba. That's the Swahili word for bales, because that's literally how the clothes arrive, in these giant compressed bundles. But mutumba is so much more than just a word for secondhand clothes. It's a core part of the culture, the economy, the whole shebang.
And if you want to see Mutumba in action, this is the place. This is the famous Gikomba market in Nairobi. It is one of the biggest hubs for this trade in all of East Africa. It's buzzing, it's chaotic, and it is absolutely essential. Thousands of people earn their living here, and millions come to find affordable clothes.
I love this description from a writer who said, "The market becomes a single dark maze of frail buildings very near each other." It just perfectly captures that feeling, It's intense, it's immersive, and it is a million miles away from those clean, orderly factories we were just looking at.
And the economic footprint here is just immense. We're talking about an estimated 2 million people who rely on the Mutumba trade for their livelihood. But here's where we get to the very heart of the paradox. Yes, it provides affordable clothes and jobs, but how can a local Kenyan designer ever compete? How do you start your own brand from scratch when you're up against this massive flood of super cheap imports? It's an almost impossible challenge.
But wait, because the story doesn't end there. It's not just these two giant competing forces. Tucked in between the global export machine and the secondhand mountain, a third thread is starting to appear, a different way forward. And it's all about fashion that's local, sustainable, and ethical. This new movement is really trying to weave a totally different future for Kenyan fashion. Instead of just looking outward to serve the global market, it's looking inward. It's all about celebrating local heritage, local materials, and sustainable practices that are good for people and the planet.
And what you're seeing is the rise of these amazing local artisans and ethical brands, like ONEWAY Kenya, for example. They're making a conscious choice to build their businesses differently. The focus is on quality over quantity, on heritage, on fairness. It's still a small movement for sure, but it's growing, and it's a powerful counterstory to the other two.
And what do they stand for? Well, it's all about fair trade principles, things like paying people a fair wage and making sure they have good working conditions. It's about using materials that don't trash the environment. It's about empowering local artists and small businesses and keeping those amazing traditional craft skills alive. Many even follow global standards, like those from the World Fair Trade Organization.
Okay, so we've got these three very different stories all happening at once. How do we make sense of it all? Let's try and tie these threads together and get a clear picture of what's going on.
So to sum it up, you have three threads of Kenyan fashion. First, the global export engine, that modern manufacturing powerhouse. Second, the local Mutumba reality, which is both an economic lifeline for so many, but also a huge hurdle for local designers. And third, you have the sustainable weaver, this hopeful, ethical movement that's trying to build a new kind of future from the ground up.
And all of this brings us to a final, pretty powerful thought. You know that old t-shirt you donated last month? It didn't just vanish into thin air. It has a global destination. It travels across the world and becomes a part of this incredibly complex story, maybe even ending up in a market just like Ikamba. So it really makes you think, doesn't it? When we take part in this global system of clothing donation, are we part of the problem or are we part of the solution? Definitely something to chew on.